Late at night, the NovaTech building gleams like a fortress of the digital age. Inside, hundreds of brilliant minds are sound asleep. Only one man remains awake. His footsteps echo softly down a long, empty hallway. Each step a reminder that he exists, though no one seems to notice. Elijah Brooks, 40 years old, tall, solid. His eyes carry the weight of experience and quiet strength. He's the night shift security guard at NovaTech, a top-tier tech company in Seattle, home to the brightest minds and the heaviest bank accounts. But no one remembers his name. To them, he's just the black doorman. By day, Elijah is practically invisible. He avoids eye contact, never crowds into elevators, always walks a little slower to stay out of the way. The younger staff mockingly call him Black Ghost, the silent shadow in the white halls. But Elijah never reacts. He simply nods, like it's an old habit. No one knows his past, that he once served in the military, fought to save children from a village under siege. He held his comrades' lives in his hands. But when he left the battlefield, he didn't carry glory. Only one thing remained: his dignity. At NovaTech, Elijah chose to live by principle, always on time. Every shift documented in his worn notebook, down to the smallest detail. No complaints, no interference, no arguments. To him, peace was more valuable than any justification. But behind that silence were eyes that saw everything. Elijah saw the phoniness behind the glass walls, the condescending glances, the cold transactional handshakes. He saw it all, but said nothing, because Elijah believed the truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. One ordinary night, like so many before it, he locked the doors, checked the cameras, and wrote a few quiet lines in his log. Outside, the rain fell. Inside, justice slept. But no one knew. Elijah's silence was about to wake an entire system. If NovaTech were a digital kingdom, Bryce Harrington would be its arrogant prince. Born to be served. 33 years old, the youngest project director in the company. Good-looking, driving a sleek sports car, speaking like every word that leaves his mouth is worth gold. Graduated from the Ivy League, backed by a wealthy investor father. Bryce never had to climb. He was airlifted to the top, and because of that, he believed he belonged to the class born to command. He lived by an unspoken rule: those who serve are not worth looking in the eye. To him, security guards, janitors, and cleaners were just the floor beneath his expensive shoes. And Elijah, the black night guard, was rock bottom on that list. One night, Bryce returned late from a client meeting, realized he'd forgotten his access card. No one answered his calls. Frustrated, he banged on the glass doors of the ground floor. Elijah appeared, calm, professional. Following protocol, he requested identification. "I left my card, open the door." "Sorry, sir. I'll need to verify your identity through the system or contact your department supervisor." "I work here. You're just a damn doorman without a degree." Most people would have snapped back, but Elijah didn't flinch. He simply looked at Bryce, calm, unwavering, unafraid. The eyes of a man who'd seen real war. And in that moment, Bryce felt fear, though he didn't recognize it. All he felt was the sting of being challenged. He took a step back, sneered. "Fine, I'll remember this." And he did. From that day on, Elijah became Bryce's favorite target. He intentionally left trash for Elijah to clean, called him Morgan Freeman 2.0 with bugs, made racially charged jokes, all veiled in sarcasm. He told the door-blocking incident as a laughable story, twisted, of course, to paint Elijah as some power-hungry guard. But Elijah, like always, didn't respond. And that silence drove Bryce mad, because some people can't stand being ignored by the one they want most to provoke. 2 nights after the ID card incident, Elijah entered the locker room, just like he always did before his shift. It was a small space, tucked away in a quiet corner of the basement, enough for a single wooden chair and an old metal locker. He often sat there a few minutes early, sipping lukewarm coffee, looking at the small photo taped inside his locker. His late wife, taken by cancer, and his daughter, now in college. But tonight, the locker door had been forced open. Inside, the family photo had been ripped in half, left scattered on the floor. His military medal, the only thing left from his years in service, lay crumpled in a dark corner. And across the locker door, scrawled in bright red marker, were the words, "Go back to the ghetto, hero." Elijah stood still, not angry, not shocked. He knelt down slowly, picked up the torn pieces, and dusted off the metal, as if it still held honor, even lying in the dirt. Then he took a cloth and quietly wiped the words off the locker, stroke by stroke, as if erasing not just ink, but an insult etched into his soul. A small sound behind him. Elijah turned. A young woman, an intern, stood in the doorway, frozen. Amy, 22 years old, only 3 weeks into the job. She'd always noticed Elijah's eyes, not out of curiosity, but because they made her feel safe. She gasped, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God, who would do that to you?" Elijah looked at her, then gently put the medal in his pocket. His voice was low, like a breeze in the night. "Don't worry, child. Some places, you only survive by staying silent. But this is a workplace, not a war zone," Amy protested. Elijah gave a faint, weary smile. "You're wrong." Amy took out her phone. "I need to report this." Elijah raised a hand, calmly shook his head. "No need. No one saw. No one will believe. If I speak, they'll say I made it up." She slowly put the phone away. Her eyes, full of sorrow, lingered on him. A man quietly humiliated to his core, yet still choosing to rise, like someone who had seen far worse. And that night, like every other night, Elijah began his shift. No complaint, no anger, only footsteps echoing down the white hallway, like a quiet sigh from justice, buried deep and unheard. The next morning, whispers swept through the tech floor. A prototype laptop, classified and unreleased, had gone missing. It contained top-secret internal data, and it had disappeared during Elijah's night shift. Just hours later, Bryce stormed into the surveillance room with an HR manager in tow. "I want the shift logs, camera footage, everything from last night, right now." His voice was ice. Elijah was called into administration. The room was cold, sterile, a long, empty table under fluorescent lights. Bryce lounged with his legs crossed, eyes gleaming with false authority. The HR rep sat beside him, trying to stay neutral. "We need an explanation. You were the only one present in Sector C, and unfortunately, the cameras malfunctioned." Elijah didn't argue. He calmly reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick, worn notebook, his nightly logbook, where he meticulously recorded every detail of every shift, minute by minute, entry by entry. "I documented everything. At 11:12 p.m., the lights in Sector C were on unexpectedly. I checked, found nothing. At 11:37, I turned off all lights as per procedure. No one passed through the corridor afterward." Bryce glanced at the notebook, then smirked. "That's not evidence." Elijah met his eyes. The same steady, calm gaze. No fear, no flinching. It made Bryce feel cornered, though he didn't understand why. "You think silence is a shield?" Bryce hissed. "You think saying nothing keeps you safe?" Elijah answered quietly, "I don't think anything. I just do my job." That composure, that unshakable calm, made Bryce seethe. He couldn't find a crack to break Elijah with. All he had were implications. Not enough to fire, but just enough to poison doubt. Elijah left the room alone. No one said a word, except for one. Amy stood at the end of the hallway, eyes filled with worry. "Are you okay?" Elijah nodded. "I know you didn't do it. I'll find a way." For the first time since entering NovaTech, Elijah looked her in the eye and smiled, a small, tired smile. "You don't need to do anything. The truth always finds its way." The conference room on the 9th floor was designed like a modern lecture hall. Curved rows of chairs, a massive projection screen, and sterile blue-white lighting shining down on tense faces awaiting the quarterly report. Elijah didn't belong here. He was only present to assist with the audio setup, a small, forgettable task in a room full of tailored suits. Halfway through the presentation, Bryce strutted up to the podium, grabbing the mic with the swagger of a man who thought he owned the floor. His voice was confident, his words smooth, scanning the room as if expecting admiration. Then, for reasons no one could truly explain, maybe it was the frustration or just habit, he turned, pointed at Elijah, standing silently in the corner. "I can't concentrate with a damn monkey in uniform staring at me." The room fell completely still. No laughter, no gasps, just a silent ripple of shock spreading like a wave through the room. Bryce stepped down from the podium and marched toward Elijah. "I'm talking to you, you useless black piece of nothing. What's wrong? Can't understand plain English?" He shoved Elijah's shoulder, then jabbed a finger hard into his chest. Elijah didn't say a word. He simply looked at Bryce, the way a grown man looks at a boy doing something stupid. Then gently, he removed Bryce's hand and took a step back. Bryce mistook it for fear. Big mistake. Bryce lunged, throwing a punch, fueled by ego and rage. But before he could make contact, his arm was twisted behind his back, forced down in a clean, swift military hold. In less than a second, Bryce was face down on the polished floor, his wrist pinned, completely subdued, like someone who had never learned how to fight. Elijah leaned in, his voice clear, cold, and commanding. "I'm not a security guard. I'm a former Special Forces soldier, and this is the last time you lay a hand on me." No one clapped. No one dared intervene. Only silence. Not from approval, but from fear, awe, and the realization that what they had just witnessed went far beyond any office drama. Bryce squirmed, his face red with fury and shame. Elijah let go, stepped back, and stood tall, as if he had never lifted a finger. One employee quietly pulled out their phone and recorded. Within hours, everyone at NovaTech would know who truly deserved respect. The video began with Bryce's furious yell, "I'm talking to you, you useless black piece of nothing." A few awkward chuckles could be heard, not from amusement, but confusion. Then the camera shook as it captured the moment Elijah took Bryce down in under 2 seconds. Silence. Then Elijah's voice, steady and sharp as steel through fire. "I'm not a security guard. I'm a former Special Forces soldier. This is the last time you touch me." The video was only 46 seconds long, but within 24 hours, nearly every NovaTech employee had seen it. It spread like wildfire. Quiet, fast, unstoppable. At first, wide-eyed disbelief. Then came the whispers. "Is that real? Elijah used to be in Special Forces?" He dropped Bryce to the floor, just like that. Then came the shift, in glances, in body language. People stopped avoiding Elijah's gaze, and for the first time, he wasn't seen as the black ghost, but as someone who mattered. The next morning in the elevator, Elijah walked in. No one looked away. One female employee nodded softly. "Good morning, Mr. Elijah." He nodded back, gently, still the same man. But now his presence meant something. In the company cafeteria, Amy sat in a corner, watching it all unfold, as if witnessing history being rewritten in real time. "You can't ignore the truth forever," she whispered to herself. That same day, a private internal thread began circulating. The T9 incident. What should we call it? Meanwhile, Bryce felt something he had never known before. Disdain. Not from subordinates, but from his own peers. Because now, he was the guy who got dropped by a janitor in public. The NovaTech building still glowed bright into the night, but now Elijah's quiet silhouette in the hallway was no longer forgotten. It had become a line in the sand, between justice and injustice, between patience and awakening. Bryce didn't sleep that night, not from pain, but from humiliation. His name, Bryce Harrington, project director, the face of NovaTech, was now plastered across internal chat threads, buried under memes and biting comments. Veteran, 1, director, 0. Security alert. Don't mess with Black Ghost unless you've written a will. Bryce fell like a glitch in a video game. The next morning, Bryce showed up late, eyes puffy, jaw tight. He didn't greet anyone. Immediately, he scheduled a private meeting with senior leadership, off the record, behind closed doors. There, he spun the perfect story. Elijah didn't just attack me. He's got a history of PTSD from combat. I genuinely believe he's a danger to our work environment. He knew the blind spots in the surveillance system. It's possible he planned this. It could be revenge. I strongly recommend suspending Elijah immediately, for the safety of all employees. A few managers hesitated, but Bryce leaned in. If something happens later, NovaTech will be liable. No one wants a scandal. Less than 24 hours later, Elijah received the email. You are temporarily suspended pending an internal investigation. No explanation, no opportunity to speak, just a cold, abrupt message, like a punch you never see coming. Elijah read the email, closed his laptop, and looked up. No surprise in his expression. He had lived long enough to know. The truth isn't always believed first. He calmly packed his things, removed his employee badge, placed it gently on the security desk. No protest, no plea, no words. But he wasn't alone. On the 4th floor, Amy, the young intern, sat staring at the security feeds. She couldn't accept how easily a man could be erased with nothing but a convenient lie. I won't let you fall like this, she whispered, eyes locked on the screen. From that moment, an unofficial investigation began. No one knew, but now the truth had an ally. NovaTech had over 250 surveillance cameras. Amy knew that. She'd done her senior thesis on internal security systems. She also knew how to access the archives. 3 weeks of footage stored quietly, ignored by most, but not by her. Not this time. That evening, in a tiny tech room beside humming servers, the heartbeat of the building, Amy sat alone. The glow of the monitor lit her face, focused, sharp, and fearless. She rewound footage from 2 weeks earlier, before Elijah was even on anyone's radar. Most clips were boring, empty corridors, doors opening and closing, people passing by, until one frame made her freeze. Bryce, alone, after hours, no ID badge. He entered the basement locker room, used a physical key to open Elijah's locker. On camera, Bryce pulled out a photo, looked at it, then crushed it in his hand. He took a red marker from his pocket and scrawled something on the locker door. Then he laughed. Alone. Amy held her breath. She kept digging. Cross-referenced access logs. Twice, Bryce had used another employee's card to enter the restricted tech wing, a place only Elijah and the tech team were authorized to access. She pulled up Elijah's logbook, the one Bryce mocked. Every line handwritten, precise, honest. 2340, lights on in the tech room unexpectedly. 0012, faint noise from the storage bay. 0305, rechecked area, no visible tampering. Timestamps, details, unshakable integrity. Amy compiled it all into a single PDF report. Title, Internal Report, The Truth About Elijah Brooks. And she sent it to only one person. Nathan Caldwell, CEO of NovaTech, a former Army officer, the only one who'd ever looked at Elijah with respect. At the bottom of the email, she wrote, You were a soldier once. You'll understand. Some battles don't need bullets. They just need truth and loyalty. Then she shut down her screen, sat in the dark for a moment. She knew she'd done the right thing, and she also knew a bigger storm was coming, but this time it wouldn't wash Elijah away. On the 3rd day of his suspension, Elijah returned to NovaTech, not to work, but to say goodbye. No one knew he had come. No one saw him off. He walked quietly through the halls, past the surveillance room he once knew by heart, past corners where he'd once paused every night. Each step a silent farewell to a life he had carried with quiet dignity. He entered the security locker room one last time, retrieved his family photo, now carefully taped back together, and his bent military medal, folded his uniform, wiped the NovaTech logo gently with his sleeve, and placed it neatly in a box. Finally, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, handwritten. The letter was short, just one paragraph, but every word struck like it had been carved from truth. I didn't fight in war to be a hero. I fought to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I thought that in civilian life, I'd find a place of dignity and fairness. I was wrong. I'm not angry. I'm simply sad. Sad that in a world overflowing with brilliance and achievement, what's still missing is basic human dignity. Elijah Brooks. He placed the letter in a white envelope, along with a small black USB, the one Amy had quietly handed him the night before. It contained the video, Bryce vandalizing his locker, writing racist slurs, entering restricted zones. Elijah placed the envelope on the executive reception desk, the place reserved for direct correspondence to the CEO. No note, no grand gesture, just a quiet exit. Head held high, his gaze light, as if he'd finally laid down a weight he'd carried too long. Upstairs on the highest floor, Amy watched from the glass window. She didn't stop him, because she understood. This wasn't a defeat, it was a departure wrapped in quiet triumph. The next morning, when CEO Nathan Caldwell opened the envelope and watched the footage, he said nothing for 10 minutes. Only his hands gripped the edge of the table, and his eyes, red with the pain of a soldier who had just heard a gunshot that came not from a battlefield, but from a wounded heart. 8 a.m. the next morning. An urgent company-wide email arrived in every senior executive's inbox. Emergency internal meeting, 9 a.m., strategy room, 12th floor. Mandatory, no exceptions. Nathan Caldwell, CEO. Within 30 minutes, every department head and vice president was seated. The room was silent. Only the ticking clock could be heard, like the beat of a heart waiting for judgment. Nathan Caldwell walked in, back straight, eyes like steel, in his hands a white envelope and a small USB stick. Without a word, he plugged in the USB. The screen lit up. Bryce, caught vandalizing Elijah's locker, scrawling hate, smirking like it was a joke. Then, footage of him using someone else's ID to enter restricted tech zones. And finally, Elijah sitting alone, writing in his shift log, his handwriting straight, military precise, honest. Nathan placed the envelope on the table, opened it, and began reading Elijah's letter aloud. His voice was low, firm, each word hitting like a blade. I'm not angry. I'm simply sad. Sad that in a world overflowing with brilliance and achievement, what's still missing is basic human dignity. No one breathed. A few lowered their heads. One person wiped their glasses, and in the corner of the room, Bryce sat pale, hands clutching the chair. Nathan looked him dead in the eye. Effective immediately. Bryce Harrington, you are permanently dismissed. No reinstatement, no negotiation. NovaTech does not tolerate racism, abuse of power, or the destruction of another's dignity, whether in words or in actions. Within the hour, an internal email was sent to the entire company. Subject line, apology, and gratitude. We apologize to Elijah Brooks, a man who chose silence, who did what was right, and who endured injustice without ever lashing out. We thank him for turning pain into principle, for reminding us of what NovaTech had forgotten. Dignity is not tied to titles. It's shown in how one acts when no one is watching. Starting today, NovaTech adopts a new core policy, respect above all. And somewhere in the long hallway, where the black ghost once walked each night unseen, people now turn their heads, not to ignore, but to honor, because where dignity once walked unseen, it now shines. 1 week later. At NovaTech, a quiet change sparked quiet whispers. A new office had opened on the 5th floor. Outside the door, a sleek nameplate read, Elijah Brooks, Head of Oversight and Workplace Integrity. There was no grand ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just a simple company-wide email from the CEO. He never asked for a title, but we need people like him to remind us every day, kindness is not a choice, it is a responsibility. Welcome back, Elijah Brooks. Not to guard doors, but to protect the very values we stand for. Elijah accepted, not for status, not to punish Bryce, not to prove anything, but because now he no longer had to bow for his dignity, and he wanted to make sure no one else in this building ever had to again. On his first day back, the ground floor lobby was unusually full. From tech staff to interns, even mid-level managers, they lined both sides of the hallway like silent soldiers waiting for a commander to return from the battlefield. Elijah said nothing. He walked slowly, dressed in a well-fitted suit, a leather portfolio in hand. He didn't need to look around. He could feel every gaze on him. Not avoidance, not discomfort, but respect, reverence, and quiet gratitude. Amy was the first to bow as he passed, and like dominoes, the entire corridor followed. No one told them to. There were no signs, no slogans, just a shared understanding. Elijah was no longer the black ghost. He was the boundary, the quiet line between right and wrong, between silence and conscience. That evening in his new office, Elijah opened his old logbook. On the first page he wrote, Day 1. Not here to guard the gate, here to guard what's right. He set the pen down, leaned back in his chair. Outside, Seattle shimmered beneath city lights, and within NovaTech, once a place where dignity was forgotten, a new light had been lit, a light named Elijah Brooks.